Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today. My name is David Nolan, and we'll be discussing and demonstrating on-demand reports for desktop, tablet, and mobile displays. To start, I'd just like to say a bit about Sytech, the company. We've been a software vendor for over 25 years. We're a Rockwell Encompass partner, and the product that we're talking about today, XLReporter version 14, is distributed and implemented worldwide in a variety of industries and settings. What do? We make XLReporter, which is reporting software that allows you to generate reports and dashboards in industrial applications using the skills that you already know from Microsoft Excel. Our other calling card is our first class dedicated support provided by veteran engineers here at our Massachusetts headquarters, and they enjoy working with our customers at every stage of their automated reporting applications. Now, this might seem like a very basic or fundamental question, but I think in a presentation like this, we have to answer it. What is reporting? Well, reports convey information, and information depends on the industry that we're talking about and the people viewing the reports. For example, in the water and wastewater treatment industries, the state government typically requires reporting for regulatory compliance purposes. Manufacturing companies would require views of their production at various scopes or various levels of their process. Facilities managers might be interested in monitoring energy usage. In the food and beverage industry, clean in place reporting is commonplace for sanitation purposes. OEMs and again, manufacturing companies might be interested in monitoring the effectiveness or the efficiency of their equipment. For those of us that work on alarm systems, we probably know the ISA 18.2 alarm management standard. As you can see, the flexibility of the product really allows us to be involved in an endless variety of industries and applications. A little bit of background on why we settled and chose the workbook standard. It's a very commonplace technology used by 1 in 7 people on planet Earth. And that means that the technology is very easy to learn, and things like design tips and templates are readily available on the internet. So it's a very easy technology to learn, even if you're not already familiar with it. Now, within the framework of that technology, our objective is to take the workbook and implement it in industrial settings without the need to integrate Microsoft Excel directly into our own product. When we say that, we mean we're talking about designing report templates as workbooks, distributing them as PDF, web pages, and email attachments, and optimizing the formatting and the content for display on mobile, tablet, and desktop devices. We encapsulate that objective with the product tagline, which is Go Beyond Excel, because that's exactly what it allows our users to do. Now to discuss a little bit about how XLReporter fits into an industrial setting. The diagram that you see here can basically be thought of as an industrial or a SCADA network. You have XLReporter Distributed Edition installed on that network and connected to a data source. And that means it could be a live data from a PLC, it could be a historian or HMI data logs, or it could be a relational database such as one that contains the alarm history of the process. And it could even be any or all of those things at the same time. But once XLReporter is connected to the data source, it can then generate reports either automatically on time or event. For example, collecting a turbidity value every 15 minutes continuously, or collecting machine KPI and production information when a machine has completed the job cycle. But the other thing that it does, which we're here to talk about today, is it generates reports and dashboards on demand from clients that can either be a Windows application installed on a Windows desktop or accessed through a web browser. Windows client is installed on any device that has a Windows operating system. It allows you to view scheduled reports, generate on-demand reports, perform manual entry, and distribute reports to configured email groups. The web client allows you to do those things as well, but it displays content in a way that responds to the device you're using to view it. So as you can see here, you might be able to access it from a desktop browser like you see on the left and see an expanded view of a report. Then you could also access the same report from a mobile device, and you see a streamlined version of the content that's up to the standards that we expect from all the apps and the websites that we know and love to use on our phones or tablets. Now, another thing that the clients can do is integrate directly into your HMI as an overlay display. So what that means is a user could launch a push button like that yellow reports button that you see down on the bottom right of that picture. It would actually bring up the reporting application directly on top of the HMI. And why would you do that? Because it basically allows you to integrate your reporting solution as an extension of the HMI itself. So you can do things like view scheduled reports, generate the on-demand reports, and even do things like apply electronic signatures to report, which I know is a commonplace requirement in industries like life sciences. And in practice, this basically would mean that you would see the Excel Reporter client just displayed right on top of the HMI. User could go in, generate a report or review a report, maybe hone in on a particular period of time or event in the process. And once they're satisfied that they've seen the information they need to see, they can return right to the normal view of the process without ever leaving the HMI application. And one advantage to using the web client in this context is if your HMI is mobile responsive, then your reporting application just extends that mobile responsiveness as well. And I think in this case, we probably would be because I believe in this diagram, this is a Rockwell Automation factory talk view system. And when we talk about distributed applications and multi-user environments, we have to talk about user security, which Excel Reporter provides. It has secure authentication and allows you to restrict the capabilities of your users based on user groups. So that means you could have like a manager's group like you have here in this diagram, which might have access to every aspect of the reporting application, including the design tools. And you might have a separate group for operators who are only allowed to access the information relevant to their particular job roles. I'd like to talk about a couple of case studies so you guys can see how this technology has been used in the field by our customers. And I want to illustrate two different case studies. One is a bit of a basic example, and the other one's a bit more advanced so you can see that the technology is scalable to a variety of applications. The first case study here is a mobile dashboard. We had a customer that had a fairly basic automation application. He had a tank farm. And he wanted to do things like be able to monitor the tank levels, the temperature of the materials, and various other machine KPI. But he didn't have a historian or a dedicated HMI or a SCADA system that was able to collect and visualize this information easily for him. So what we did was we installed Excel Reporter, we connected it to live data in his PLC, we used built-in responsive templates so that he could just open up his smartphone anytime he was walking the plant floor and just see a live snapshot of data anytime he needed. So in this case, really isn't any high-tech SCADA system involved, but he's still able to add a lot of value and visualize his process data pretty easily. Second case I'd like to talk about, this customer was a facilities manager at a pretty large academic university. He wanted to provide a couple of different views into the alarm data that was being logged by his plant historian. He wanted to have one view of the alarm system, which just displayed any and all ongoing alarms that were occurring in his process. And then for each of the alarms included on that high-level dashboard, wanted to generate a dedicated detailed report which showed things like the history of the relevant tags to the alarms, the history of the alarm states, and visualize that information on a trend display. So what he ended up doing was having that dashboard displayed on a big screen monitor inside of his control room. And when he had alarms popping up in the system, he would dispatch a technician to whatever location on the campus was required to handle that alarm. At that point, the technician would go and load up the detailed report on their mobile device, which would show them where the alarm was occurring on the campus, what the machinery was that was involved, the offending tag that was causing the alarm. And then he could use that to monitor the alarm as he was performing the corrective actions and verify that values had returned to normal once he was finished. Now, how would you go about developing your own mobile responsive application using Excel Reporter? Well, first, you could head to Sytech.com. We've got a download link right at the top of the homepage there. You really can't miss it. And once you did that, you could download and install the trial version of the software, excuse me, and connect it to your data source. And if you're like us, you're probably isolated, stuck at home right now. You may not actually have access to a live or a real process data source. But in that case, we have simulators for live data and a PLC, historian, and alarms. So you can use those to learn the product and develop an application, even if you're not connected to your actual SCADA system. Now, if you're interested in learning more about the product, on our site, we have a support area, which has a document and video library that will not only show you how to connect XLReporter to the specific SCADA software that you're using, but also has a set of real-world example-based tutorials that will teach you everything you need to know about the design tools. Now, if what you're really looking for is just to speak to a live human being and get questions answered and get a roadmap for how to move forward on your application, you can go ahead and open up the contact link at the top there, or just call us on the phone and we'd be happy to work with you. One final thing I'd like to note before I move on to the demonstration portion of the presentation is that I recommend you guys check us out on social media. We're on LinkedIn and Twitter, and you can check out all the latest technical, instructional, how-to tips and tricks type videos that we have on our YouTube channel as well. So now I'd like to transition to a live demonstration here. Let's bring up my self-reporter machine. And what you're looking at right here is the XLReporter Project Explorer, which is basically the first thing that greets you once you've installed the product. But loaded is a sales demo project. And we probably wouldn't want to have the demo reports inside of an actual live application. So the first thing we would do is create our own project. The first step in that is giving the project a name. And I'll name it after the presentation that we're doing here today, but typically you would name this after the facility that it's installed in or the types of reports that it's generating. The next step in creating a project is defining the data sources or connectors. And here you can see that we support a variety of the leading HMI SCADA vendors like Rockwell Automation, GE Digital, Emerson Delta V, Wonderware, and many more. We also have open standards like OPC, DA, UA, HDA, and ODBC and OLEDB databases. For the purpose of the demonstration, I'm just going to use the XLReporter simulator connectors. I'm going to create one that goes to a simulated live data system in the PLC. I'll create another one that goes to a simulated historian. It's telling us that we're switching the XLReporter web server over to this new project. So now I'm sitting in my new on-demand mobile project. And for web-based applications, the first thing that we would do here is create what's called tag catalogs or connector catalogs. And what these do for the purpose of web applications is they basically just rein in and organize the tag space that's represented in the PLC or the historian or whatever the connector is that we're using. So if I create one, I want to do catalog here. If I create one, I can see the whole tag space inside of my connector. And I can group the tags into relevant categories based on the report that I'm using. So for example, if I create a catalog called temperatures, I can then go into the live tag browser in my PLC, and I can build up a list of all of the tags in the system that represent a temperature value. Once I've done that, the tags get added to the catalog, and there's some other information that helps us organize this catalog based on the data type and the name of the tag. And it's a bit difficult to visualize here since the simulator tags are pretty short. But if you've ever worked with a PLC or a historian, you know that sometimes the tag paths can get pretty long and the tag names themselves may not actually be human readable. So what the catalog does here is it stores the actual tag path in the background as the name, and it allows you to assign a nickname. So this could be Dave's mixer temperatures here, or it could be mixer chamber 1 temperature. You can basically use this to assign a more human readable name to the tag as it's configured in the PLC or the historian. And if the interface that you're connecting to supports descriptions, like for a tag that you would configure in an HMI, the description is brought over automatically as well. I'm just going to create a couple more connectors just for the purposes of the demonstration here. This one I'll call process equipment. And I'll just add all of the KPI information that I would need in my application. So I've got a mixer machine, an extruder machine, a reactor. I've got a couple of water pumps. I've got some production KPI data as well. Now, since these catalogs are specific to the connector, I'm just going to go quickly create another one for my historian connector as well. Same thing, I'm just going to add all of the machinery that I have configured in the historian. And because this is the simulator, these are basically the same tags we saw for the PLC, but they represent the historical logs for those tags. Now that I have my catalogs created, I can begin creating report templates. And a report template basically represents the configuration that's going to be used in this case to generate an on-demand report. And we have two ways of doing that. We have the template library, which is a wizard-based tool that allows you to select a template from a pre-configured list and then modify it as needed for your application. The Studio allows you to create a template from scratch using a workbook design environment. So let's first take a look at the library. And in here, I'm going to select the mobile real-time dashboard template, which basically is going to work in the basically like the first case study that I mentioned before, where you would have a PLC, you wouldn't necessarily have a SCADA system or a historian, and you just want to be able to refresh live values on your phone from the process. All this, actually, I'll call it live values. I think that's a little bit better representation of what it's doing. And when you create a template in the library, you basically assign a connector. So in this case, it's my PLC connector, and a method, which in this case is on demand. You can also assign titles to the report as well in the wizard. Now, once that's created, you can see the template is added to the project, and I can go right into the web portal now and begin using it to generate a report. So I've got my Google Chrome browser here formatted as a mobile device by basically formatting the screen in the shape of a phone. That way you can see how it would appear on a mobile device. You may have to use a little bit of your imagination here to see how this would work on a phone. But if you want to try this for yourself, we do have a live running version of everything I'm about to go through, running at www.xlreporter.net. So I encourage you guys to go check that out on your desktop and your mobile to see how the responsive reports work in a live environment. But in any case, I've loaded up my live values template here, and I'm presented with a tag selection. So I can open up the tag browser. You can see that presented are the catalogs that I defined before. So if I expand process equipment, I can see all of the machine KPI tags I built in that catalog. I'm just going to go ahead and add them all into the dashboard. When I click this refresh button, we'll go out and collect live data from the process and display it. So I go over to the current values. We just see them all listed out as a table. We also have some other visualization here as well. Obviously, these are stock pictures, but it basically conveys that if you had a process monitoring tanks or a particular piece of equipment, you can add some extra visualization to the template. And it's not necessarily going to be a dry, just tabular list of the values. Now, the next thing I want to show you guys is basically a report involving a historian that's going to be configured kind of in the same way. So I'll go back into the template library, and I'm going to select the historical line charts template, and we can see how this template responds to a desktop versus a mobile display. going to give it a description here as well. And that will show up in the web portal as well. This time the connector is going to be the historian, but the method will still be on demand. It's going to want to launch the Windows client here. I prefer to show you guys this in the web client, so I'm going to stick with that. If I go back into my web portal, I can back out. You can see that the template I just added is in here, along with my description right below. In this case, because I'm using historian, not only are tags presented, but there's also a selection for the date range. So if I open this up, I can say I want to see the trend of my tags, say between the 4th and the 7th. I get a similar tag browser configuration as before. Same thing, I have my tag catalog here. And this template takes up to 6 pens. So I'm going to add all the tags for my mixer. I'll throw in 2 for my extruder as well. If I refresh that, you can see the trend charts are organized in a single column, and the zoom and the font and everything is optimized so you can easily read it on a phone. If I go back, I expand the browser out to a larger display size. This is what you would typically be doing on a desktop, obviously. And I can go in and I have the same report template, the same parameters. I refresh. You can see I get a different view of the template here with the charts stacked in a 2x3 table. Now you might be saying, okay, wow, he showed us a live dashboard and he showed us some trend charts. That might not be the most exciting use of the technology, but now I'd like to show you guys something a little bit more interesting using a custom template. So I'm going to go back into the Project Explorer and create a third template. But this time I'm going to use the Template Studio. Here I'm going to create a new template by importing a workbook that I already have saved on the system. So we'll call this the Energy Report. And I'm going to base the content on an existing workbook. Come back out to my desktop. I've got a template here, energy generation. And you can see when I do that, it's imported this Excel workbook into the Design Studio. And inside this workbook, I've got quite a bit configured here. It's basically a weekly energy report that's going to compare the wind speed on my wind farm to the output of my generators, with the idea being that as the wind speed dies down, the backup generators are going to have to kick on and produce more energy. So this report basically compares that by collecting the samples from the historian that represent the wind speed and the generator kilowatt hours total. And then it uses just some standard workbook functionality to visualize and analyze that raw data. So for example, here we can see that if we have data collected over a week and we place the timestamps here, these cells here will tell you what day of the week that date occurred on, just using cell formatting. This breakdown will show you, based on that day of the week, how much energy is being used on the weekend versus the weekday, how much energy is being used at different times produced at different times of the day, based on which generator the information is coming from. And it all is basically generated but from a few samples that we're just going to add from the historian. So I'll show you that now. I'm opening up the Connect interface in the Template Studio, which basically just defines what data is going to come in from the data connectors and where it's going to be placed. So for this example, I'm going to use the historian connector, and I'm going to create a new connection group. Now we can bring in raw values, the raw samples that are recorded in the historian or the database. But in this case, because I'm measuring things like totals and highs and lows of the wind speed, I'm going to use a summary group because that lets me get summary calculations off of the tags like min, max, average, and total. So here, I don't really have, unfortunately in the simulator, some good tags that represent this type of process equipment. So I'm just going to enter in some hypothetical tags here. We'll say this is, the first column is going to be the wind speed for the maximum. I'll use the same tag again to get the minimum column over here. And then I'm going to add my 2 generator tags. Now I can select the calculation for each tag. So this one, the first one for high, will be maximum. For the minimum column, I'm going to select that calculation. And then because these tags are a accumulating value or a totalizer that's just adding up throughout the day, I'm going to select the last sample of the day for each of these tags. Now I'll go over to the time period tab here, which defines how this data is basically just going to be sliced up from the historian. Because the format of my report represents daily cell values over 7 rows over the week, I want to set my interval to week, my interval to day, I'm sorry, and set the duration to week. And what that's going to do is bring back a 7-row table that calculates the min, max, and last sample of these tags every day over whichever week I run the report. And you can see that here in this connection preview. If I refresh it for this week, we get the data starting on the 3rd and going to the 9th. You can see the maximum win, the minimum win, and then the output of the 2 generators. So I can save this connection, and now I'm going to place it into the relevant cell in the report. Now when I run the report, it's going to place that data into all of these cells here and bring this dashboard to life. Let's go back into the web portal and check this one out. My energy report is in here now. If I refresh it, we see that the layout of the Excel workbook that I created has basically come to life because we've actually placed the process data into those cells. If I run to a different week, see the report will refresh for that as well. One thing it's asking me here that seems a little bit strange is for the worksheet that I want. As far as I know, I only had one worksheet in that template. But this is actually a good chance to tell you how the responsive part of this web portal actually works. So you can see here, it actually does detect another sheet in there. And if I go and narrow this down to phone mode, I actually see a totally different representation of the report that's streamlined for mobile displays. So how does that work? Well, let's go back into the template studio and I can show you. In here, I've hidden the sheet so it doesn't display on large devices. But by tagging the name of my sheet with the name small, I've indicated to the XLReporter application that when I come into this report on a phone, this is the sheet that I want to see. And this sheet doesn't actually have any XLReporter functionality on it. It just uses cell referencing to point back to my report sheet. Now, those of you that are familiar with Excel will probably already know what I'm talking about when I say cell referencing, but what I mean is the same data that's displayed in terms of weekday generation, weekend generation over different parts of the day. These cells just point back to references on the report sheet. So report K7, for example, would be where I have my weekday total calculated. Now, because I don't want to actually have to pick the sheet that I generate in this report, because I'm only really collecting data onto this one, I can use XLReporter to control which sheet gets updated when I run the web portal. So I'll just come in here and tell XLReporter that I don't want the user to be able to pick the sheet. I want to always use the report sheet. And then I'll take away their ability to choose the sheet by removing the control. Now when I come back and run the same report, save my template. You can see there's no control for the sheet. It just refreshes the one that I've told it to in the template, and we still get the same report. Now, as an OEM or a system integrator in this situation, I'd be saying, okay, this is great because, if you can see here, I really didn't actually do very much with XLReporter functionality here. All I did was just place a couple of values from my historian in this area. And the whole rest of the configuration that brings the report to life is just Excel functionality. I've got a bar chart at the top. I've got a pie chart, and they're feeding the cells that I've got the data collecting into. I've got Excel formulas to calculate the sums of these columns. And so if I had to build this type of a report for my customer, I could get 95% of the way there just on my Excel knowledge alone. One final thing I'd like to show you guys is, as I mentioned in the slideshow before, is the user login functionality. So if I come over to the project tab of my Explorer, I can begin creating user accounts. So here, I'm going to add a supervisor user who might represent like a plant manager or somebody in that type of role. I'm going to make them a member of the group managers. I'm going to add a second user, operator. I'm going to make them a member of the group users. What these user groups allow us to do is provide tiered access based on the credentials used to log in. So if we look at the managers group, they've got access to all aspects of the application, including the development tools and the ability to edit scheduled and already generated reports. And the users group does not have access to development tools. They couldn't go in and reconfigure templates, delete templates, or do anything with the configuration of the project. And they also can't edit and save generated reports. Now, on top of just the project user level organization here, we can also organize the templates so that each user is only presented with the relevant information. So, for example, if I go back into my energy report template, I can go into the settings menu here, and I can say that this template is not accessible by the group users. Now, when I go back into my web portal, I'll actually sign out here so my new credentials will kick in. Now I'm presented with a login screen in place of the start session menu that I had before. If I log in as the operator account, sign in, you can see I can't even see that energy generation template at all, so I'd have no idea that it's even there. But if I come back and log in as supervisor, I have that template, and I can generate it as normal. That concludes my live demonstration portion of the presentation today. Hopefully it's showed you guys a little bit about how our mobile responsive functionality works. It shows you how you can implement it pretty easily in your own application, just using basic Excel skills that you probably already know. Once again, I'd like to thank you guys for attending today. And at this point, I think we'd now take some questions.
Dave, we got a couple of questions rolling in here. One is there a restriction to the number of templates that you can configure to run on demand?
Nope. The licensing the product places no restriction on the number of templates that can be configured, the number of data sources that you can have, or the number of tags that you can access.
Another one kind of along those lines is, can you talk a little bit about the client licensing?
Yes. So the client licensing for XLReporter Distributed Edition basically depends on the package that you purchase. So beginning with the XLReporter Professional Edition, that edition comes with one concurrent client license. So you could have one user at a time operating the web portal that I was showing you throughout the demonstration. And the XLReporter Team Edition basically just adds additional clients onto that. So you can purchase that in tiers of 5 and 10 and so on, depending on how many concurrent users you would need to provide access to in the application.
And those users are concurrent, which means that they're not tied to a machine. They're floating licenses.
Correct. Yep. You could create a user for every single employee in your company. But if you have a 10 client license, only 10 of them can be using the portal at one time.
Okay. Another question that came in, it's maybe a slightly off topic, but it kind of goes back to something that you were showing, is that Does this support like unit conversions when we bring the data in at the report level? So if you've got something like millions of gallons per hour or kilowatt, watts per hour to up to kilowatts or so.
Yes. So if I go back into that configuration menu that I was showing while I was building the template, and I picked the tag and I picked the calculation, there's also a scaling interface as well. So if you had something coming in as the gallon per minute flow, and you want to display a daily flow total in millions of gallons, you could enter in the arithmetic formula to produce that conversion here in the data connection, and the data would be converted to your format before it was even placed in the report.
And obviously, because it's Excel, we can also
Oh, yes,
on
good
the
point.
sheet as well. But
I wanted to keep the answer a little bit simple, but you're correct in mentioning that, Tom. As you can see, I've got formulas all over the template that I have here to do totals and formatting and things like that. But if you're more comfortable doing that kind of scaling inside of Excel because you're more familiar, you could do that in a hidden or a raw data area of the report and use the cell referencing that I explained before to only display the final result of your calculations.
So it depends on how transparent you want to be with how you get to those numbers.
Exactly. The product is very flexible, and there's multiple ways to approach those kind of problems depending on what's easiest for your application.
Okay, another question rolling in is, can I have, because you had mentioned Windows clients before, can I have Windows clients and web clients on the same system, or do I have to choose one or the other?
Nope, they all feed off of the same client licensing, so you can access the web client from any system on the network that you want. You can have the Windows client installed in any system, and you can use them all interchangeably. There's no limitation that says in any context you have to use one or the other. You can use either or on any system. Provided with the Windows client, obviously it has to be a Windows system.
Okay, can you just talk a little bit about how we connect, how a client connects, what needs to be set up on the system, Windows-wise, to enable the functionality, the portal?
Well, yes, so I had done that before we began the presentation, but all the web functionality for our web portal just uses Windows Internet Information Services, or IIS. So you just have to have a version of Windows that supports that feature. And beyond that, XLReporter will basically do the rest.
Was a professional gives you one client, and then Team Edition starts at 5.
Yes, exactly. With regard to the licensing, the product itself is installed as a distributed edition, which enables that web portal. And then beyond that, the number of systems that can access it is just dependent on the licensing.
Another question is, can multiple users generate reports on demand at the same time?
Yes. Yep. So if you have a 10 client license, you could have 10 people all generating reports using the same template from 10 different devices. They could be on a mixture of phones, tablets, desktop, web browsers, Windows clients. It all can happen concurrently. There's no technical limitation on doing that.
Can you clarify just a little bit on the user accounts? So if you bring up the user accounts dialog, this is maximum clients 5. Now, does that mean that we can only set up 5 users, or?
No, so the maximum clients is only concurrent connections. You could have 500 users configured here. Basically, it would only allow 5 of them to connect at the same time. So say you have a supervisor come in and start a session on the web portal, and then you have 4 operators go in and start a session. At that point, if a 6th person or any more additional try to connect, they will not be allowed to until someone else disconnects. So it's unlimited number of named users. The limitation is only on concurrent connections.
Question here about, could we get alarm history as well into these reports? And I guess that question could even be expanded to, am I restricted in any way to the number of data sources in the template?
Nope. So I just created these two for the purposes of the reports that I was going to show you guys. But you can have an unlimited number of connectors here. There's no limitation on the number of data sources you can involve in an Excel reporter project. And with regard to alarms, you can see that we support open database connections, or if you're using one of the supported HMI SCADA interfaces. For example, with Rockwell, we have a built-in interface for FactoryTalk USC alarms, alarms and events. The same thing, for Wonderware or Emerson or any of these SCADA systems that we support.
Is there a restriction on the amount of days that we can ask for when it comes to any of these historical or alarm sources?
No, in some cases there may be limitations on the server side if you start asking for billions of data points, but we have no restriction on the Excel reporter side in terms of the number of data points or the number of samples that can be included in a report.
Right. The only restriction we have is the amount of rows you have in an Excel
worksheet. Yeah, and if you're adding over 1 million rows of data into a report, at that point you may need to rethink things and perhaps simplify.
In a single Excel reporter, how many connectors can connect at the same time?
Oh, yep. So this, we were kind of mentioning this, but here I have two, but you can have an unlimited number of connectors. I think I've worked with customers in the past, with crazy historian networks that probably had 50 different connectors in here. So you can have there's no limitation licensing or on the technical side for how many different data sources you can involve in your project.
You talk just a little bit about viewing maybe scheduled reports that have been generated automatically.
Yes, so I know the topic of today was on-demand reports, but if we wanted to generate scheduled reports, I can quickly show you guys that as well. So I'll just for the purpose of expediting, I'll use another built-in template. But if I go into here, just to show you guys a tabular basic report to schedule it, we can call this one 15-minute turbidity. We'll use a scheduled definition here. Scheduled report, you basically just have to include the tags in the configuration since they have to be known at the runtime. And you could just say, for example, I would want this report to collect new data every 15 minutes over the day. I can do things like collation, where I could have 30 or 31 daily sheets inside of a monthly report. If I just run one, I make it easier shown than explained here. So for example, if I run this a couple days, I can quickly generate a scheduled report, so I can show you guys how that would work.
This report that you have generated just now, is it printable?
Please don't unmute yourself. If you have a question, please put it in the chat window.
Here you can see now that I've gone and added that scheduled report. I can come back into the client, and here before we were working on the on-demand area of the web portal, but there's a scheduled area as well. You can see that the report that I generated is shown here. And if I look at the Windows client, it will show it in more of a traditional workbook and worksheet type of a scenario. So you can see here I have a 29 sheet with all my 15-minute samples over that day, and a 30 sheet with all my samples over that day. So you're not restricted to just on-demand reports. You can use any combination of scheduled and on-demand reports as you need for your project, and both types are viewable from any client that you access.
And just to follow up on that, the question was, is it possible to use on-demand and schedule report template at the same time? The answer to that is yes.
Yes, you can. Yep. And in that case, you would probably configure a scheduled version, as I did, that has defined tags and defined time periods. for the schedule. But then you could configure a version of that template that would open it up. For example, if you wanted the user to be able to select tags when they run the on-demand version, you could do that. If you wanted to be able to select the time period in the on-demand version, you could do that. So yes, you can combine the same data, into on-demand and scheduled reports and access them at the same time.
Yeah, or you could actually run the same thing. If you don't want the user to pick the tags.
Yeah, and that's basically what I did when I ran that energy report. This report, there's nothing really variable about it in terms of the tags or the time period. It just runs over a week. So I could schedule this once a week and just have this report produced automatically for me in the background. Do you have any other questions, Tom?
I'm just waiting through right now. There's a lot of people in this WebEx, so I'm just trying to.
Oh, sure, no problem.
Sure. So just give me. Okay, it looks like we're getting towards the end of the questions pertaining to the on-demand.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions about the on-demand, about the web portal, or about
Okay, well, I guess if we don't have any further questions, then I guess once again, I'd just like to thank you guys for attending. If you would like to know more about XLReporter or discuss a potential application, please contact us. We'd be very happy to work with you.
Yeah, if you have questions, if you're a pre-sales, if you haven't bought yet, if it's a potential sale, please contact sales@sytech.com. And if you are an existing customer and have questions, you can email support@sytech.com. I'd like to thank everybody for attending.